And in the most appalling way, that has happened this week already, after the revelation by Palestinian officials that at least 45 people have been killed and more than 200 injured, some horrifically, following an Israeli strike on a tent city of refugees in Rafah in the south of Gaza, where Israeli tanks have also been seen operating today. Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu called the deaths a tragic accident, but there's been global condemnation and calls from across Europe for the Rafah offensive to end immediately. Labour's Keir Starmer has called the images horrific, but for many, criticism of Israel from the big British parties has been far too slow and far too muted. With me now in the studio is someone who certainly thinks that way, the SNP's Westminster leader, Stephen Flynn. Stephen, we've just heard the Shadow Secretary to the Treasury, Darren Jones, saying that a Labour government would recognise Palestine. Is that a move forward? It's coming too late, presumably, from your point of view, but you would welcome that as a move forward?
Well, of course, where was this support for recognising the state of Palestine over recent months when up to 100,000 people have been killed and injured, collectively punished by the Israeli state for the actions of a terrorist group? But the thing that's angered me more than anything over the last couple of days is the fact that David Cameron calls this distressing. Keir Starmer says it has to stop. Is this it? Is this the extent of what the British establishment are willing to say? They should be getting senior Israeli officials, dragging them to their office and saying that if you do not implement a ceasefire right now, then there will be sanctions. There will be an end to arms sales. We will recognise the state of Palestine, but we'll also end the diplomatic protection we give you at the UN. The British establishment is complicit in the actions that Israel has taken for many months because of their cowardice and failure to call them out.
I suppose what they would say is that if you look at Biden's increasing anger about what's going on and Netanyahu's absolute refusal to engage in that, nobody outside Israel really has influence on the government there.
Well, of course, we're a permanent member of the UN Security Council. We trade heavily with Israel. We sell them arms and we protect them. Of course, at the UN, through our votes, we have a significant amount of leverage that we've been unwilling to use up till now. And yes, it's fine for the Labour Party to now say, oh, we'll recognise the state of Palestine. That's a good step forward, but it's not enough. We need stronger words. These weasel statements from David Cameron and from Keir Starmer in recent days don't do the scale of the death and destruction justice. We need a ceasefire. We need an end to the collective punishment of the Palestinian people.
We are, of course, in the middle of an election campaign, and the leader of the SNP, John Swinney, has said that if the SNP wins a majority of seats in the campaign, then he will start negotiations again with Westminster for a path to independence. Does that mean that if you don't win a majority, then independence is off the table for the time being?
Well, as you know, Andrew, democracy doesn't start and stop simply on the result of an election. We've obviously got a party policy which we'll seek to pursue because that's what members believe is right, and
but
it's
in
what I
real
believe
terms,
is right
it would
as
be
well.
Off the table, wouldn't it? Really,
well,
you can't get a majority.
Well, that would be for the UK government to determine. And if Keir Starmer wants to run into the election telling 50% of Scots that their views and their votes don't matter, because we know roughly 50% of Scots do believe in independence, and that's quite the message to take to the people of Scotland. If he wants to fight on those terms, well, let's do it.
If we don't know what's going to happen in this election, it's silly to pretend we do, but if the Labour Party got more seats in Scotland than the SNP this time, do you think that would be a moment for John Swinney to stand down?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And, we're fighting for every single vote in every single seat, and we're doing so on the platform of putting Scotland's interests first, whether that's the economy, arguing for access to the single market, freedom of movement, investment in net zero, where the Labour Party have walked away from a £28 billion commitment, arguing, of course, against austerity, which seems to be the consensual agreement in Westminster. £18 billion of public sector cuts are coming down the line. The SNP has a different view. We want to take a different path, and I think putting Scotland first in Westminster is incredibly important.
Let me ask you about the story of the evening so far, which is that Diane Abbott is apparently not going to get the Labour whip back, won't be able to stand as a Labour MP, and therefore that her political career is effectively over. Seems to be in many ways a sad moment. Now, you had a passage of arms with the Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle, over the comments made by a Tory donor, Frank Hester, about her, which were racist. And I think she stood up at one point something like 47 times trying to speak at that moment and wasn't heard or wasn't observed by the Speaker. Yeah. So you've got history. I remember you going over to talk to Diane Abbott after that. You've got history with her. So I'd be really interested in your reaction to this story, if it's true.
Yeah, well, isn't it astonishing that the Labour Party can find space for Natalie Elphicke, a right-wing populist, but can't find space for Diane Abbott, who's been a trailblazer in Parliament for 37 years, I think it is. Someone who in recent months was obviously subject to racist comments and told that she should be shot. And this is the arm, the protective arm that the Labour Party is putting around her by throwing her out onto the kerb. If this is the way the Labour Party treat their own, how are they going to treat the public when they're inevitably successful in England?
And if she's listening, which she might be, what would be your message directly to Diane?
My message to Diane would be very simple, and it would just be to say thank you. Thank you for the work that you've done over so many years. Thank you for changing the face of politics on these isles. And I hope that in the years to come, she's able to look back on that with a smile on her face, because she deserves to do that.
All right, Stephen Flynn, Westminster leader of the SNP, thanks very much for being in the studio.